So today we're going to be talking about myth, story, and the environment. And we're going to start by introducing each other. It's a really incredible group here, a variety of protagonists who are tackling the issue in very different ways and are in very different stages in their lives and in their journey in their effort to try and make a difference and to try and respond to the situations that we're in. So we're going to kick it right off and dig in. I also want to thank everybody who's joining us, who is trying out this new viewer with us, trying out this new Restream technology. We're real excited about it. I hope you're liking your first looks at it right now. Please feel free to jump into the discussion. If you have any questions or thoughts, we're going to try and find an excuse and opportunity to bring those in. So thanks for coming with us on this little bit of an experiment as we go into myth, story, and the environment. So to get started, we're going to kind of work through some of the challenges that we're facing, that the whole human population is facing, and really the population of Earth is facing. And we're going to go through a series of conversations. We're going to start by just looking at where we are now, and then we're going to kind of depart into where things are going. So to get started, I want to invite everybody to introduce themselves. And then we'll kick it off with a little bit of a conversation about where we are. So hopefully, as you introduce yourself, you can also give us just a little bit of your impression on the situation we're in today and what you see as the maybe some of the stasis, maybe some of where we're stuck. So my name is Will. Y'all know me from Myth House. I'm department chair in the film and I'm department chair in general education at the Film and Performing Arts College, Husson College, and we have a couple of professors here from Husson as well. And I really don't have a whole lot to do with the environment. It's my privilege to get to support some of the projects that we'll hear about today. And that's really all there is with me today. Brian, will you introduce us to yourself and tell us a little about what you're up to?
You bet. Thanks, Will. So my name's Brian Aschenfelder. I have been working in the environment and sustainability space in the entertainment industry since about 2015. And I teach sustainability to artists at Husson College. I'm a scientist at heart, right? So I sort of live my life at the sort of nexus of storytelling and science. With the intent of sort of inspiring, young people, for example, on, exactly what it is that we're sort of up against. And, I think to answer the question that you posed, Will, I think that the current situation is such that we'll find ourselves saying nobody could have predicted this, when in fact we could have predicted it and we did. I don't know. Anyway, so maybe that's my 5 seconds on that.
Brian, I guess got to say, as we get into this conversation, that I think you were the first person I really started engaging in this dialogue with when you're coming into teaching. And we're just talking about how, when we first started talking, there weren't even sustainability courses for you to model your course around. You had to really make it up out of scratch. And wow, where we've come today. And Mel, you joined that project with Brian a couple years later. Would love an introduction to you and to hear a little bit about what you're up to.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. It's such a pleasure, honor to be here. A little bit about my background. So I got into sustainability when I first went to business school in Babson, and I did my major in global business management and environmental technology design. And then I wound up going to Israel, and I did my master's in environmental science, and I worked for a think tank there of 122 organizations and looked at their business models. I switched over to the US, where obviously I am now, and I do corporate team building and training with businesses, also working alongside a nonprofit called the Wolf Tribe. And we work with animals and integrating them into a corporate space. And so I would say that for me, what I'm finding is that this is an interdisciplinary issue, and a lot of sustainability right now is siloed out into different areas and disciplines, and people are speaking different languages, when in reality, we as a human species are part of and not separate from nature. And I think that that's an essence that I would hope that we begin to restore that connection to land and to each other, because you'll only value and monetize something and be willing to protect something that you care about.
Awesome, Mel, and thanks for forwarding that awesome piece of work that some of your students just put together and their response to the situation we're in. Really, really cool to see. Yeah, Brittany, tell us a little bit about yourself and introduce us to some how you're involved with this project.
Sure, thanks. My name is Brittany Baum. I am based in Dallas, Texas. So I've always been fascinated by the environment and sustainability to some extent. But my background, professionally speaking, I studied economics. I am a consultant. That's my day job. And I work in data and analytics. And it's really just in the last year, I'd say, that I've really embarked on this journey of sustainability. I'm getting more involved. So I am part of Climate Reality DFW on the executive committee. And I would say, my 5-second piece on, the biggest challenges we face is, and from an economic perspective, is we've got to change the way people are incented today. So people are very incented. There are certain industries that are incented to pollute, right? They're not charged for that. They're able to get away with that sort of thing. So we've got to change people's incentives if we want to change the problems that we're facing.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, it's really interesting to hear the disincentive is resisting change. This sense that we're separated from the world is resisting change. Our narratives are not supporting change. Really interesting to hear. Roger, this is the first time I'm meeting you, so great to meet you. Would love to hear a little bit more about what you're up to.
Thanks, Will. Delighted to be here. I very much appreciated the invitation. My name is Roger Knudsen. I chair the Dallas-Fort Worth chapter of the Climate Reality Project. I'm also a founding member of that chapter. We've grown since the fall of 2017 from the 5 of us who started the chapter to a chapter today that has right at 250 members on the membership list. Both Brittany and Michael are members of the chapter that I chair at the moment. I'm intrigued listening to the way you've all answered the question so far. When I talk about the state of things in the climate crisis, I'm inclined to say that right now, I think we, the human race, is in a race between 2 kinds of tipping points. On the one hand, I think we are facing tipping points on the environmental side. Climate science is no longer simply talking about separate kinds of events like the frequency of hurricanes or the severity of the wildfires on the West Coast, or the numbers of immigrants being pushed out of their homes by climate crisis, and instead talking about the way in which all of those different systems, planetary systems, are beginning to interact, or always have, but we haven't understood it very fully, so that we're beginning to see cascading effects. That's the new language coming from science on a lot of fronts. And the IPCC and our own U.S. government panel 3 years ago now already said time is very short if we're to forestall some of the worst of those catastrophes. So we're approaching tipping points on the climate side. On the other hand, I think that we are now, and this is particularly true since Biden's election, we are at a political tipping point, not only in the United States, but many places in the world. We have seen an incredible rise of a youth movement worldwide that is a catalyst for change on scale, really on the scale of the problem. And so we know from a lot of research that it doesn't take an enormous number of people in any population to reach the point where that call for action is something the government is no longer able to resist. So I see much of the work in the climate activist groups like ours as contributing to building that movement, moving toward that point where governments can no longer resist. Clearly, Biden is listening more than the previous president. And so I think we are at a tipping point. The business side of it, I suspect you all know better than I do, but I will just cite two quick facts to illustrate where I think things are headed irreversibly on that side. The cost of electricity from wind power has fallen 70% in just the last dozen years, since 2009. It's even more dramatic for solar. The cost there for solar panels, the cost has fallen 89% since 2009. This is an unprecedented kind of rate of change in energy production. So all over the world, renewables are now cheaper than fossil fuels as an energy source. It's just a matter of political will. That's the tipping point that I think we're always working toward, is building that movement and that demand for change. I can leave it there, but happy to talk about all the questions on your list at whatever length you'll give me a platform to do it.
Well, I mean, first of all, it just sounds awesome. Do you guys know each other? Do you know Brittany?
Well, of course.
Okay.
Brittany's on our executive committee. Your dad heads up one of our most active working groups in the Dallas-Fort Worth chapter. We are in meetings and conversations all the time. So yes.
5 to 250. That's just incredible and really, really encouraging to hear. And I got to take the opportunity just to ask, what's the demographic like on those 250? What are the people?
Oh, that's wow. In our chapter,
I mean, just age, maybe even. You're talking about this youth movement. I'm curious if you're seeing.
Well, the age range from 16-year-old high school students to retirees who are even older than I am. I'll be 74 this year, and we have several members who call me a youngster. So one of the things that tends to characterize Climate Reality Project as an organization, it's an organization that was founded, you may all know, by former Vice President Al Gore right after his film in 2006, An Inconvenient Truth. He used the money from his film to found a group that he initially called the Climate Project, now called the Climate Reality Project, in which he basically trained people to take the slide deck from his movie and start educating the public to kind of spread the message of the film. And we've been training people in that work ever since. But partly, I think, because of Gore's notoriety, celebrity as a leadership as a political figure and climate activist all through his life, we attract incredibly well-educated, well-placed people. We have, I'll just give you a couple of quick examples. We have an architect in the chapter who headed up the AIA's National Committee on Sustainable Design a year ago. We have an attorney in the chapter who worked in the Obama White House on the Clean Air Plan. We have experts in solar energy. We have lots of people from the business community, but we have people who are government employees, people who work in the City of Dallas Office of Environmental Quality and Sustainability, federal government employees who work in sustainability projects, and we have a new member coming in who's spent 30 years with the EPA. So we have a very diverse group of professional people, but at the same time, we have grassroots organizers coming from just all parts of the city. We're very closely partnered with the Poor People's Campaign that organizes very heavily in South Dallas. This is a southern city, y'all. It's very segregated. North of the city are the white suburbs. If you go south, it's all black and brown. Poor People's Campaign is very active in South Dallas. Some of their principal organizers are part of our chapter. We have a Latinx outreach group that tries now to get out to the Latinx communities in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So we're quite diverse and have our fingers in an increasing number of pies.
Well, as we introduce each other, I really appreciate you introducing some more of the roles and more of the things that people are doing. With this beat, we really just kind of want to look at the status quo situation. And I'm hearing you say that on one hand, there's this a youth movement, but on another that people across all the age ranges are bought in on doing this, and that there's a growing interest. And you've also said, and I want to hear if maybe we all, maybe just simple as a nod, do we all agree that we're not talking about like, I mean, we're talking about pretty serious catastrophes, heavy, intense, world-threatening catastrophes that are hard for any of us to really even accept as real. Is that where most of us are at on that? So, you know, the other thing I want to say is when we're talking about, and every now and then I'll remind us that this is a myth group in its origins. So we think about how Zeus defeated his father, Kronos, right? And we think about passage of generations as this is my dad's on with us. Passage of generations as a son defeating a father to rise into the next generation. But I had this aha moment one time, which was, wait a minute, what are the stories where the fathers and sons work together as an expression of the generations working together? And I write to my the chair of my myth program, and I ask him, and he writes back the obvious answers, and I feel like an idiot. But the answers are Odysseus and Telemachus, Aeneas and Anchises, Jesus and God. So what you're talking about is you do have some big changes when one generation displaces the next, but you actually have much larger, gargantuan changes when they work together in the much rarer events. And I think with that, I'd like to ask my dad if he'd like to introduce himself and tell us a little bit about your background.
Okay. After I got out of school, I started doing consulting for the industry. Ended up going to the Department of Energy, where I helped the oil department. Became an entrepreneur and inventor, and have spent most of my career launching new technologies, that kind of thing. The last 12 years, I've focused exclusively on energy efficiency and sustainability technologies. And the reason for that is really, let me give you two timelines. When I was born, there were about 600 million middle-class people in the world. By 2005, just in the developing world, so China, Brazil, India, there were 500 million. By 2000, it's 4.8 billion. And by 2025, there will be another 1.1 billion just added in the developing world. So when you tell a lot of our early, man was completely insignificant to the environment. And in fact, most of our indigenous societies were integrated with the living environment they lived with. They had to be to survive. So really what we're doing, when you go to Mumbai, and I've had business industries interests in China and India most of my career. When I went to China on a trade mission in 1979, it was a definite third people country. When I was in China last year before COVID, the amount of electricity that they're consuming, everybody has an air conditioner, everybody has a car, all of the fully lit all the time, and just see how we move from the industry has no impact on the environment to we are absolutely overwhelming the planet. And in fact, last year, the estimate is we use 173% of the renewable energy, renewable resources of the earth, right? So I'm talking about wood, fertilizer, fish, and so forth. So to me, overwhelming, but when you look at the history of life on this earth, humans have been around for the last 39 minutes. If you take all of the history of the earth and make it a year, we're brand new. And almost no species survive. Almost none. Like something like 99 are gone that have ever been here. So it's not maybe academic kind of threat. The last piece that I would say is there are what are called super species. Few species where the individual thrive alone. Ants, dogs, they have to have a culture because they act with it that allows them to thrive. And I think our challenge is no less than fundamentally changing the cultural lens that we look through as a species. And if we can't do that, we will not survive. So I've been in this storyteller, psychologist, because I think we have to learn how to tell a story. So I'll end up by blaming Roger. When about a year ago, we looked at the businesses and said, we have got to change the way organizations
hold on.
If we're going to deal with this, we've got to change that. Go ahead, Will.
We're getting there. We're getting there. Give me a minute. Let's come back to what happened and what made you want to change. That's next. Thank you. Awesome. Gabby, tell us about yourself and tell us what you've been up to, and then we'll circle back. And then I want to get into what is the disruption event. We're getting there.
Awesome. Hey, everyone. My name is Gabby. I work with the Sunrise Movement. I'm the internal communications coordinator over there. And yeah, I'm an organizer and activist, and I got my start in that work I don't know, maybe like 4 years ago now, 5 years. But yeah, initially I was working as an actor and doing a little bit of screenwriting, directing a couple of short films while I was living in LA, where I moved after growing up in Kansas. And yeah, that's where I met Will. Yeah, but as I was doing that work, I felt like I was just watching the world descend further and further into this state of chaos. And I remember in particular one day, I was living in Northeast LA, and as the wildfires in California were just raging across the state, I could see the smoke just north of where I lived, and I saw helicopters overhead carrying water to put out the fires. And I was walking down the street and saw people wearing masks because the air was so full of smoke. And this surreal imagery of just the sun dimmed out into this like dark orange kind of color. And in that moment, I was like, I have to give everything I can to this fight because, if I don't, and if we don't deal with this crisis and face it head on the timeline necessary, then there won't even be a world for me to like partake in film in, or to be able to like have a family and do all of the things that feel so fundamental to life. And so like as a young person, I was like, I have to do this out of necessity. And I think that's where a lot of young people are at. And what in part is driving the creation of youth movements. And so to talk about Sunrise Movement a little bit, it's a movement of young people fighting for the Green New Deal, which is millions of good green jobs to basically transform our society from the ground up. And a few years ago, we were just a scrappy org of, a few hundred people living together in movement houses and like talking about the Green New Deal with this big vision and dream. And just in these last few years, we've got to a point now where like on the presidential debate stage, the Green New Deal was a topic of discussion. And so youth movements have just built so much power because this work is driven by a necessity to protect our livelihoods and secure our future, and to have a right to the fundamental things of life, like being able to have a family and a home and not having to worry about whether or not the place you're calling home is even going to be here in 10 years. And so that's why I'm in this fight. That's a little bit about Sunrise.
Oh, thank you. That's amazing. My experience is there's been a shift of what young people say about what they want to do with their lives. They've gone from answering that question in terms of their job to answering that question in terms of what issue they want to respond to. And that to me is really, really very incredibly inspiring. Christopher, we're to you. Good to see you. Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, hi guys. I was negotiating some fairly problematic technical issues earlier, so if anything happens, let me know. But yeah, so my name's Christopher Nagel. I'm currently based in Seattle, Washington. My background is in the life sciences and ecology. I guess I would qualify myself as a journeyman ecologist of sorts. I guess, you know, kind of professional forays. I worked at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, the UNFCCC in Germany, and most recently I've come out to Seattle to work with the Seattle Aquarium on a kind of seafood sustainability rating scheme that they want to roll out. So my passions have been obviously sustainability, ecology, expressly ocean conservation issues, but more broadly, kind of, you know, biodiversity conservation. I guess just kind of being a child of the 90s and interested in the natural world, you are kind of acutely aware that, you know, to the extent that you can kind of roll out science and understand what's going on, there is, you know, kind of this dark problem that is parallel, that, you know, things are disappearing, the ways we're living is causing, you know, not just kind of the end of, you know, well, I mean, not to hyperbolize, but literally kind of the death of life itself as we, you know, knock out these ecosystems, shrink our natural spaces, and just, you know, don't carve out a robust area for, you know, kind of the miracle of biology to exist along with humanity. So, you know, that's stirred a passion in me from, you know, as long as I can remember. And, you know, I kind of I've been both involved in kind of, you know, kind of basic science, but also applied science, trying to kind of unfurl the mysteries of ecosystems and, you know, use that as a starting point to try to figure out how we can, you know, kind of live harmoniously with, you know, our kind of endowment of biodiversity. So a kind of broad environmental consciousness. Obviously, climate change is, you know, really kind of the all hands on deck scenario for, you know, everyone that is coming from any vocation or subject matter that's, you know, kind of related to the sciences and the environment and communication. And just, you know, it's really everyone's kind of been hopefully empowered to find a way that they can carve out a niche and respond to this, you know, kind of really pressing and immediate global issues. So yeah, I guess that kind of sketches out where I am, how I've come to where I am at the moment. So
well, I want to, you know, I want to
get on with the narration.
Start with you. So you're talking about the loss of life, and where I want to go next is I want to start talking about, like, what were the things that have caused, like, gotten our attention, your attention, the world's attention. My dad was starting to talk about what got his attention and how Roger had pulled him into this, how that situation started. So I'm hoping that all of us, you know, relatively quickly, because I want to get to another couple considerations, but just really quickly, let's rattle off some of the events that have just disrupted things. Christopher, what do you see that's yanked people's attention when it comes to the oceans?
Oh gosh, well, probably the most pressing that, you know, just also ties into contemporary norms and how we're living our lives is, I would say, one of the entry points for a lot of people has been a realization of just the mass plastic contamination across literally pretty much any ecosystem we take a sample of, any fauna we look at in, you know, any kind of robust way. We're finding plastics everywhere
in all of our blood,
you know,
right?
Yeah, you know, you probably have some plastic in you right now, and we're just like, you know, it's something. It's again, it's a fruit of modernity that has potentially not been considered to the 50 and 100-year timescale that we really need to be planning out with how we're going to be living our lives and the materials that we're going to be using. And we are just kind of coming to realize the absolute scale of contamination that's unfurled in front of us. So I would say that's brought a lot of people into, kind of an ocean consciousness at the moment. Additionally, this kind of more flows into climate change related things and CO2 related ocean acidification. We just have our world's most vibrant and biodiverse ecosystems in the form of, coral reef systems are under a 2 to 3 pronged threat, vis-a-vis large scale molecular level change against what they've, kind of evolved to survive through, in the last 7 to 500 million years. So that's a very rapid and unprecedented, kind of terra nova for that cradle of life. And fisheries as well. We're basically, kind of on a trajectory to really deplete most of our, commercial protein stocks through fisheries, within the next 25 to 30 years. So there's just a kind of a lot of things that we're trying to get on top of. But
these are the things that are kicking us loose. Where people hear
they're kicking us
the
loose.
News about the fisheries and they're like, whoa, and I think so many of us also, we think about we see a turtle in a turtle head or something in a piece of plastic. What's the famous kind of image, right? With the Coke can, 6-ring Coke can, right? Where we actually have these images, and sometimes it's actually a really specific image that'll go into our head. And I think the ocean is a big one for a lot of people. Everybody's been snorkeling. Everybody loves vibrance. Most colorful people, or most colorful part of many of our lives is when we get out of our normal everyday life, we go on vacation, we go into another world, we go snorkeling, it's beautiful and vibrant, and then we get a piece of news that says the coral reefs are collapsing. And I think that's it for a lot of people. What else? I want to hear what else you guys are hearing. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, please. No. I was just going to confirm that sentiment. I guess we just kind of all want to protect what's, beautiful and eternal to some extent. And we're just all trying to figure out what our role in that is going to be, and we don't have too much time to work with, so I'll yield to anyone else that wants to talk.
So what are some other wake-up calls? Oh, look, if the world
I'll jump in.
Fine right now. Brittany, please.
I was just going to say, I think it's that people are starting to see the impacts. They're starting to see the effects. I was just in an Uber car this morning, and the driver was telling me, I didn't bring up sustainability, environmentalism at all, but he mentioned it, and he said, I didn't really believe in the impacts before, but seeing wildfires, to Gabby's point earlier, like seeing that stuff, like you can't refute that. Here in Texas, we had the extreme winter event recently, right? People are experiencing this now on a day-to-day basis. So I think that's been a huge wake-up call for a lot of people.
You think the wake-up calls themselves are accelerating?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we're seeing more and more of these extreme weather events happening.
Wow.
I think I'd love to build on that. And that's a lot of exactly what I've had in mind in response to this question. And I think that ultimately the stories that resonate with people the most are stories, human stories, and stories that hit home and aren't about things that seem abstract or in the future or out there, but stories that are about humans and what's happening to humans right now. And again, seeing things like the wildfires, seeing things like what took place in Texas, in the South, and the Midwest this winter. My grandma, for example, is out in the middle of nowhere in Kansas, dealing with rolling power outages and negative 20-degree weather. And that's the stuff that you can't ignore. That's the stuff that's really going to wake people up. And seeing these things, we've come to a point where a lot of the debate no longer is like, is climate change real? It's what are you going to do about it? And yeah, we're just at a point now where you can't ignore it, where it's in daily life, where it's just something you can't ignore. And I think that's a really big thing. And yeah, that's a little bit of
I'm
what's
wondering, Gabby, or any of you, if you think that the ability to ignore it was reduced by this pandemic in the last year. Has this been a wake-up call for us at a big level?
We'd be lying to ourselves if we didn't acknowledge that one. I mean, I can just share my experience, right? I work at the largest theme park in California. We closed. We're never closed. We're open 24 hours. And you know, we have these large ambitions of being like, you know, zero emissions. That's what we want. That's what the whole world wants. Even when we turn the switch off and nothing is open, we couldn't even get to zero, right? So like, I think that opened a lot of people's eyes to the fact that like, this is what zero really means. Being closed isn't even zero. Zero is like beyond that. And that like really turned people's eyes open, I think.
Wow. Yeah. So yeah, a lot of people had to actually immediately change. Well, do you think that it also created an opportunity for change on that point? Like was that gap an opportunity for you to do, because as you closed, now you're coming back online. Was that a chance to make some changes? Do you think that might be the case across many industries?
It definitely, I think, certainly for us and probably for other people, it made you intensely aware of the things that you need to do that you weren't paying attention to.
Yeah. Roger, I can tell you've got some thoughts about this.
Well, I'm immersed at this whole week and for several more days in the latest climate reality online virtual training program. We've got 5,000 people registered this time.
Wow.
And so I'm involved in these conversations all day long and have way too much to say. But I wanted to talk on both sides of things that people have been discussing just quickly. But let me start with where this comes home most immediately for me to roost. My older daughter is an aerospace engineer. She's a NASA engineer. She and her husband build space stations, and they're going to Mars. So they necessarily live in Houston, Texas, right near the NASA campus. During her now about 25 years at NASA, she and the family have evacuated 5 times in the face of incoming hurricanes. They've stayed at home through several others, including Harvey. I would say for me as a parent and a grandparent, one of the most helpless feelings I've ever experienced was sitting in front of a computer screen watching my daughter's cell phone as she's filming the water rising up out of the street in front of her house and coming up across the lawn toward her house. She and her husband, being NASA engineers, did a lot of research before they bought this house. It sits just above the 500-year floodplain in Houston. It's the only neighborhood close to NASA where that's actually the case. And the water came up to the edge of the front porch and didn't flood her house. She was a branch manager at that time. She lost half the engineers in her branch because their homes had been destroyed, and many of them said, enough. I love the space program. I'm done with this nonsense.
Whoa.
So we're looking this year at the latest hurricane forecast. The forecast is darker than the one for last year, and last year we had more U.S. landfalls than we've ever had. But I while I'm aware that yes, these kinds of experiences break through for many people, I have to say in this group at the same time, Brittany and Michael and I organize in Texas. And if you are paying any attention to what's happening in the Texas legislature right now, you would think that most of the Texas political powers want to drag us back to the 20th century as hard as they can. The bills that are being passed to protect the fossil fuel industry, to slow down cities' abilities to enact their climate action plans, their building sustainability, energy efficiency plans are coming fast and furious. Right alongside, we've got a new bill to make it possible to carry a gun without a permit at all in public. And of course, our voting restriction bill is going to be worse than the one that was passed in Georgia.
Meanwhile, they're about to start making electric batteries there at scale.
And so we live in the midst of this incredible controversy between the forces that you're talking about. I'll just add one footnote that I'm coordinating a group of mentors in this training program. Each mentor has a group of trainees, 15 to 20. One of the mentors from my chapter sent me a text this morning about one of her trainees, and the woman said as she joined the group, "I've been a card-carrying Republican all my life. I thought this was all a hoax." Then the grid failed.
There's an inciting incident. Good example. Yeah.
And she said, "I've got to go get myself educated. How could this have happened in my life?" She was without power for a number of days. Her daughter and her grandchildren were without power and without water for a number of days. She's come over to Climate Reality now to find out what she can do. So it makes a difference. But boy, are the powers in this state. I live 5 minutes from the George W. Bush Presidential Library, y'all. And on the other side of that place, are all the oil billionaires that live here in Dallas. They haven't budged on this fight one bit. So it is still very much a struggle, and we're fighting it here in Texas all the time.
You know, I want to pull a dirty trick on all of you that I thought I might. We're gonna only 15 minutes away from when we had planned to talk until, and we're almost through with the first of the 3 acts of conversation I had in mind, and I knew this could happen. I knew this might happen. I've done this before where I've come in with 20 questions and they evaporate within the first 10 minutes, and you never know. And then I've come in and you never get through everything other times too. So here's the end of Act 1 is really about we go from the beginning where we're setting up the situation of what we've been doing and talking about the reality we're in. Then what's disrupting that situation, disrupting the repressions, increasing our awareness, drawing us into wanting to act and solve problems, and effectively calling us to respond, calling us to action and adventure. And then, of course, there are all the reasons why we might not want to do that, or hesitations, and then finally we might commit and go on that journey. So I want to ask if any of you are up for it, and you can lie to my face now and then change your mind later, to join this conversation for an Act 2. And maybe today, with our last 15 minutes, we can just really finish doing justice to this conversation around what has incited change, what's called each of you into doing what you're doing, and maybe what it's looked like for you to get started just a little bit. Are any of y'all open to that? If a couple of you nod, then we're going that direction. All right, cool.
Sure.
And I said that you could lie to my face and it'd be all cool, but I will take it personally. Well, in that case, Dad, you were starting to tell us a minute ago how you got drawn into this project. I don't actually know that story.
Yeah, I was until I get to tell everybody why I blame Roger. I got a chance to meet Roger when we were at a demonstration. Greta Thunberg was here, and the Russians got a chance to know what he had done. And unlike I had been an invented thing to this, but I found out people don't buy those things because of the systems we're in that, Roger, you were just talking about politically, where their governments are not allowed to buy them. There's pressure from fossil fuels and so forth. Roger actually went out and did something about it. So when you listen to him talk, there are like 250 people that he helped get organized, engaged. So Roger came to me one and said, well, we don't have enough businesses, organizations in Dallas that are working for sustainability. And he challenged me to do something about it. So I went and talked to like Brittany and asked, well, why is that? so we are right now working on a joint project between the Harvard Alumni Association and between Climate Reality to create a boot camp for trainees that can come in, and they are now convinced that there is a crisis, and they're asking the question, what can I do about it? So we actually have volunteers currently working on how do we create this boot camp, which right now, like, it's about 9 sessions. We've already got some commitments from some really pretty serious people to help organize a key part of to actually change the way our businesses act, and from a profit-only mentality to actually coexist with our world. We need where people can thrive, but where the earth can thrive. Profits are not, and and we need everybody's work on it. Why I'm very interested in tellers learn this story accurately, because the woman that Roger mentioned that said I was a card-carrying Republican until this happened to me, we've got to learn to tell stories so that it becomes part of our culture.
Well, it is just so cool to have all of you here, because business leaders, scientists, inventors, educators, activists, incredible. And I think that that's just so important. As you use the phrase all hands on deck, Christopher, and I think that one of the most important things is when we get going down some of these liberal paths and we get mad and angry about some of these things, we can fall into certain polarities. And one of the easy poles is to be mad at business. But it is just infinitely important to enfranchise business leaders as activists, like yourself, Mel.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in and talk about the fact that this is definitely very much a global issue. And I think that just like we saw with the pandemic, climate change isn't just looking at one country, it does not care. And I think, of course, in the United States, we live in a capitalist society. And so I think one of our biggest challenges is negotiating around the fact that currently, right now, any environmental and social degradation to the world is considered an externality. There is no monetary value and there is no consequence to it. And a corporation is required to increase profits for shareholders. So there is B corporations, which are actually companies that are taking initiative, and investors are also doing that right now, because, to be honest, sustainability, I think a misconception is that to be sustainable means it's to be more expensive, but I pursued biomimicry, which is looking to nature to solve human problems. And nature has an operating system that's been working for 4 billion years, and it doesn't have waste, and it doesn't have toxic materials. It collaborates. It's attuned to local needs. And I think it is possible for us to remember that we too can self-organize, but I do think it's going to take a global effort. So just some things that I think that are on the horizon right now that I'm excited about. I'm sure maybe some people have heard that there's an X Prize Foundation, which creates a gamification of massive worldwide competitions. And just last week, the most expensive one has come to the table. So $100 million prize for a 4-year project right now to sequester carbon from the atmosphere. And then there's organizations like the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is about creating a circular economy. And that means, right now we have a take, make, waste economy versus closing that loop and closing these supply chains. But there are already solutions. And I don't think that we need to reinvent the wheel. I think that we need to be willing to work together across borders. And I think also I want to note that, right now, some of the most biodiverse areas are in the hands of indigenous people. And some of the people that are the most affected by climate change are in the most impoverished and third world countries and have no say. And so there is this element of out of sight, out of mind. And as much, and the last point I want to make is, I think, and why I'm putting my money on the storytellers, is that we do need to change the narrative. There is a doom, gloom it is so intense, and especially for the young generation. And there's even now psychologists have a term of eco grief. And so I think that storytellers I don't think it's necessary to showcase all of the issues with such heaviness. I think we can use the arts and dance and performance and music, just like, you know, tribes did back in the day, to reconnect us. And I think, you know, you mentioned, you know, this is intergenerational. We've lost that. We've lost that passing down of stories, and also in our culture no longer, you know, doesn't really embrace or even condemn food waste, where that didn't used to be the case. And so I think that it's also, this is a cultural and a spiritual transformation that's being called upon right now.
Well, thanks for extending that call so thoroughly. And, you know, I'm thinking about what my dad was saying about how, you know, making stuff that people don't buy. And we're talking about storytelling. And, you know, I go back to conversations I had with Brian many years ago about how, you know, you might have the right light to reduce energy use at the theme park, but if it doesn't fit the narrative theme, then they're going to be used. That stuck with me when you said that the story's going to win and the decision making. And I think that's what's so important. And actually, where I'll be going after this, I'm very proud about it, is the advanced story class at Husson College. They're all delivering their stories at the end of this. This is the finale of our school year. Really can't wait. And their main focus has been, how can we take on global issues and transmute those into narratives and into stories? And so today they're going to unveil their stories and their ideas about how to do that. And I think, you know, I want to hear from Gabby, who is one of these students. But before we go over there, I just want to say, you know, as many of us here are involved in this program that's mentioned between Climate Reality and Harvard Alumni Association, is a training program. Well, at the same time, you know, I think it's so cool what Brian and Mel have done to create a course for storytellers to train them in these areas. And I think that then that's what we're all here doing today as well, is to educate. So with that, one of the former STAR students who's out there changing the world, Gabby, I'd love to hear some of your thoughts before we go.
Yeah, sure. I think one thing that's coming to mind right now for me is the fact that we didn't get here by accident. Back in the 70s, scientists working for Exxon knew what was happening. They knew very well. They did tons of research on it. They knew and continued to devastate our globe despite that. And that's because of the system behind this crisis. And unless we dismantle the systems that brought us here, and we face the fact that a few like fossil fuel billionaires at the top are the largest part of why we're here. We can't face this issue, I guess, without dismantling those systems, because we're here because of those systems. And this issue will continue until those systems are dismantled. And I am thinking about kind of what you were saying, Will, about people no longer being able to ignore the issue. And I'm not sure myself if people were necessarily like ignoring it. And I mean like everyday people, not fossil fuel billionaires, politicians, so on. But I mean everyday people. Like I can speak for myself a little bit. When I was in LA, I was super poor. And every day I was focused on making sure I was going to make rent, making sure that I was going to have food in the pantry. And that's the reality for so many people in America today, and so many people across the globe today, is just the focus on surviving day to day and making sure that you're taken care of, that your family's taken care of. And when that's your reality every day, because of the systems you live under and the economies you're within and the political systems you're under, then you know, you don't necessarily always have the privilege to be like, let me save up for an electric car, or, you know. And so ultimately, like, I think where we're at right now is with this crisis becoming more and more just predominant and impossible to ignore, impacting people's real livelihoods, there's this understanding emerging that we do have to dismantle these systems. We have to rebuild our society from the ground up. And I think that's where a story of hope can come in, is that, yes, we're faced with this monumental challenge. Everything is stacked against us. The most powerful people in the world are wielding their power. They're bringing in politicians to their side. They have monumental wealth, and things seem impossible. It's like,
but
how
we have to do it anyway.
Yeah, and ultimately, like, there's this vision that we can go and rebuild our society, and that together there's a big us and a narrow them. And
Yes.
when we build together, when we unite together, we can take that on, because ultimately we wield the power, and we have the power to rebuild the society. We have the power to create good jobs for everyone, to demand good green jobs for everyone that can go and rebuild the society, that can get us off of fossil fuels, that can really deconstruct the systems of power that fossil fuel billionaires and their politicians have just built around themselves. And we have that power and we have to wield it. And I think that's the vision of hope.
And you guys, this group is a group that has been responding to this call, has been responding to, what we just heard were all these calls to deconstruct, to tell stories, to make changes, to iterate with circular economies, all these different things that you guys just put out these calls. That's exactly what we want to get to next time. So next time, that's what we're going to talk about. How do we do that? What is the deconstruction? What are the solutions? What are the stories? What are the circular economies? So I'd love to hear maybe any final thoughts from y'all. And then let's come back next time and maybe dig into some of the solutions together. Yeah, Dad.
Can I follow up with Gabby? I think you're right on about this, Gabby. I want to put a context, though, that the single largest source of wealth in the United States is the extractive industry. And the derivative wealth on that, for example, 30% of the revenue for the railroad comes from hauling coal. So the railroads have been one of the largest funders of misinformation. So I think it's not
and we're
just
all trying to help them because they're
but
greener.
it's rather when everybody is corrupted by this system, all of us have to have an income, and that huge source of wealth corrupts all of us at a level. Really, the only way we're going to change the system is by changing the story that the culture is telling. And if you track opinions on, and you go back to 2005, we have come from heavy denialism to now 79% of the U.S. population believes that we're seeing a crisis from the climate and that it is man-made and that we need to address it. So actually, we're coming to a place where only about 10% are deniers, and of those, over half are what I call professional deniers. They are paid to be deniers. So we've got to get this story and move this story into, but first, believe it. Second, that all of us have motivation to vote, to spend our money on environments where they are sustainable, where the expenditures are. But I think, Gabby, you're dead right about what you're saying.
Well, that sounds like a perfect place to leave it. Calling us all to spend our money the right way and to contribute the best way we can. And let's get back together. And thank you guys for at least on the surface pretending like you agree. Just kidding. No, really looking forward to it. And we'll schedule offline. We'll share the information with everybody as we usually do, and invite everybody back. And personally, I'm actually very interested to hear from all of you about your thoughts about what I can do and how I can change how I'm participating in this world. Because I know that the electric car is a small thing. Thank you all for coming. Really a pleasure to be with all of you.
Yeah, that's great. Can't wait to continue this conversation, honestly.
Thanks, Will.
Thank you
Nice
all.
to meet you all. Good
And
night.
by the way, I'm going to send a follow-up link just so you all know, because the discussion may have been going on. I have no idea what discussion might have been happening in the live viewer. So we'll get into that. And if you guys want to respond to anything or engage any of that conversation between now and next conversation, please do. All right. Well, have a great weekend and a sustainable summer.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
See y'all.
Bye, guys. Talk soon.
Thanks.